Well, hello everyone and welcome to Creative Partnerships Australia's Knowledge Series. This is the third in the series of 8 Knowledge Series presentations that Creative Partnerships are undertaking this year. So thank you all so much for taking time out of all your busy schedules to participate in what I'm sure will be a really fabulous session. Before we begin, of course, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this webinar takes place. I'm coming to you from Melbourne, and we would certainly like to pay our respects to the Indigenous custodians of the land, both past and present. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be available to you after the session today. You should receive an email link that will link you into the webinar. So if you want to go back over any of the material, you'll certainly have the opportunity to do that. We request that everyone remains on mute throughout the course of the presentation. There will be the opportunity to ask questions later on, and I'd ask you to write those questions down in the chat function. And towards the end, I'll select a few of those questions subject to time that we can explore in further detail. In terms of your cameras, it'd be fabulous to leave your cameras on, at least for part of the presentation. I think it's always great to get direct feedback through body language. And if any of you are nodding off, we'll know to ramp it up a little bit. Not that I'm expecting that at all, of course. But if you could keep your cameras on for at least part of the presentation, I think that helps the presenter move through things. What else? That's really it. I think without further ado, I will introduce our fabulous presenter today, Tammy Zonka. Tammy is recognised as one of America's top 25 fundraising experts. She's a trainer in the discipline of transformational philanthropy, and we will hear lots more about that today. Of course, all of you understand the importance of storytelling and crafting a really powerful narrative for your organisations in the role of fundraising. And Tammy is a really experienced, incredible trainer, coach, and leader in the non-profit fundraising area, having raised more than $500 million, yes, $500 million in her career, including a single gift of more than 27 million US. So she does a lot of this, leading webinars, online masterclasses, private workshops, retreats, and also manages her online membership community of fundraising transformers. So we've got a lot to get through in a relatively short period of time. So I will now hand over to Tammy. And Tammy, thank you so much for undergoing the geographical inconvenience of being in Detroit at the moment. And it's heading towards late evening. So we'll get cracking right away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for that warm welcome. And yes, I can see you, so there'll be no nodding off. Annabelle, Guy, Coralie, I've got my eyes on you. Yeah, Coralie's waving. So let's get started talking about one of my all-time favorite topics, and that is transformational experiences, how to create them for major donors so that we can touch their hearts, engage their minds, and sustain their giving, hopefully for their lifetime. So I'm a real believer that Storyliving is about engaging the donor from their point of view. So sometimes as fundraising professionals and nonprofit professionals, we engage people through our filter, right? We look at them and assume that what the preferences that we have for engagement, for cultivation, for giving are the same preferences that our donors want. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's a really dangerous assumption because they aren't our donors. We are their cause. And if we can engage them through that lens, transformational gifts will follow. So I'm a big believer in storytelling and engaging donors in the storytelling process. But there's a little risk with storytelling because if we're not careful, we regale our donors. We tell them these magnificent stories, and we, the master first storytellers, do all the talking, right? And the donor is in the position of listen, and I'm kind of setting the stage for what's next. I'm orchestrating this, um, and story living, by contrast, is more of a dialogue. It's more of a shared experience that is carefully cultivated and designed based on the donor's preferences. So, what we're aiming for here is to really become the donor's third line. So, forgive the crass reference, but when I say third line, I'm really talking about the end of their life. I'm talking about a typical obituary. So think about the obituaries of those that perhaps you've lost, people that you love. Um, the first line is typically the family that they left behind. Married to so and so for so many years, how many children, their names, their spouses, their grandchildren. That's the first line. The second line is their career, what they did for a living, how they contributed through their work. But the third line is their passion. It's how they made a difference in the community. It's you, hopefully, right? Your festival, your museum, the ballet, the theater. It's the work that you do day in and day out that was their passion, their third line. So that's what we're aiming to do through Story Living, is help the donor write the story of their life so that at the end of their life, your organization played such a key role and it's very apparent. All right. So that's where we're headed with Story Living. And this is all based on a study that resulted in a book called The Seven Faces of Philanthropy. I'm just a little show of hands. How many of you have read the book or you've heard of the book? Not too many. All right. So we're gonna spend quite a bit of time understanding at the 50,000-foot view these seven personas. And then we're going to, over the course of the next 75 minutes or so, we're going to drill down into these personas, focusing mostly on the four personas, four of the seven that are more likely to gravitate to the arts. Now, you probably have donors that are giving to you already right now who, represent the breadth of all seven personas. But what I'm talking about today is those that are likely you've got a deeper concentration. The more that you understand this, the more you'll be able to engage donors on their terms. All right. So let me go back a moment and just talk about the high level. So starting with the most predominant persona, which the authors and the researchers called the communitarian, and I've nicknamed the do-gooder. So they represent 26% of the donors that were interviewed during this study. So 26%, the highest concentration. The next highest concentration is what we call the devout. They're really giving because they feel like they're called to give by God, universe, whomever they recognize as a higher power. Next is the investor at 15%. This person's looking for a return on their investment. Next, we have the socialite at 11%, the repayer, someone who just has a passion for the arts. The arts have touched their heart somewhere in their life, and you're their third line. At 10%, the altruist at 9%, and the dynast at 8%. So again, you're going to learn more about all of these, and then a particular focus on the four that really do gravitate to the arts. So for each of these seven personas, the researchers identified what is the philanthropic point of view. If there was a one sentence orientation to how this persona relates to philanthropy, what would it be? he and they both, he and she, drill into how does this persona go about evaluating and selecting a nonprofit to give to? What are their recognition and stewardship preferences? Do they like lots of recognition? Are they more modest in their giving? And then, based on that knowledge, how can we guide the donor journey from their point of view? And one of the things that I'll tell you is that when you understand your donors from this perspective, it builds trust and it accelerates the the time in which you begin seeding the idea for a gift. It accelerates the time in which you secure that gift. I can tell you, Stephen mentioned that I had the privilege of cultivating a $27.1 million gift in Detroit from a company while they were in bankruptcy during the US Great Recession. So all the odds stacked against us. And that's a story I'll tell you another day. But I can tell you that gift from the moment we met to when that gift was secured, it was 6 months. 6 months. And part of it was knowing the persona and what the donor wanted, where they wanted to go with their philanthropy. So, all of this to say, we want to work with the donor side by side to co author their story. So, let's talk about those philanthropic views. So, the communitarian, again, these are in stacked ranking from most prevalent to least. The communitarian really believes that doing good, it just makes sense. It's logical. The devout, as I mentioned, doing good is God's will. The investor, doing good is good business. The socialite, doing good is fun, or it should be fun if you want me to stick around. The repayer, I'm doing good in return. I have this passion. I've had these heart stirring, soul touching experiences with the arts, and I want others to have those experiences as well. The altruist, feeling good feels right, right? So that whole orientation is very heart centered versus the communitarian where it's logic centered. Notice the difference. And then the dynast, doing good is a family tradition. So you often will see generational philanthropists who identify with that persona. So you, as the brilliant nonprofit professional, the fundraising guru that you are going to ask yourself the following questions as you think about a donor or a donor company or couple or a company perhaps that you're cultivating for an investment in your organization. So you want to really evaluate, you know, how do we share values? Do the donors' beliefs and our organization beliefs and values, are they a match? Because of course, philanthropy is nothing more than an exchange of values. As you cultivate this particular individual, how will you measure impact and report impact or uh, propose what the impact of their giving will do? And how do you demonstrate the need in your community? Why your arts organization is relevant as basic needs organizations, you know, hunger and literacy and all of those things, because you are, but just on a different plane. How can this donor experience your work up close and personal? And how can we really determine, confirm the donor's preferences and how they evaluate you, uh, and make certain that we are laying out those steps that the donor is inevitably going to be going through, but we can anticipate them. You know, Penelope Burke, who was the author of Donor Centered Fundraising and Donor Centered Leadership, she says that at least in North America, of the 30,000 donors that respond to her survey every year, she says that major donors convey that it takes about 2 years for them to trust us enough to make their most generous gift. And if, again, we can anticipate those needs and kind of dish them out, plan them as a part of the donor journey, we will accelerate the securing of that gift. So the question number 6, I want you to think about: beyond money, how can this donor contribute to the solution? Whatever solution you're working on, whether it's expanding a program, making the festival even larger, um, whatever you're trying to solve, whatever need you're trying to fill. Because donors don't want just to be a source of money, right? They're not the automated bank machines. They have other experiences and influence and expertise that they can also contribute. And the more that we engage the whole donor beyond just their financial support, the deeper the relationship, the higher the donor retention, and the more that they will become lifelong donors, and that you have a shot at being that third line in their final story. And then, of course, what appropriate stewardship and recognition will you propose for this donor? Because not everyone wants the same kind of recognition. All right, so now we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to focus on our communitarians. So, again, this is the highest concentration of major donors, representing 26% of all major donors, and their whole philanthropic orientation is that doing good makes sense. How they evaluate you is how effective you are in your programs, whatever your program is, right? So they're probably looking at overhead, right? They're looking at how much of your operating budget goes to administration or fundraising. They may be measuring you based on how many people come through your venues, how many patrons you have, how many donors you have, however they define effectiveness. That's their number one selection criteria when choosing a nonprofit. The communitarian typically prefers restricted giving to make a big impact, right? So they want a juicy project, not just unrestricted operating funds. And they typically like individual attention and public recognition, but just within a key donor group. And you'll get some examples of that in just a little bit. So they don't want, a billboard or a front page thank you on the local newspaper. They want something a little more modest within key audiences that they value. So when you're talking to a communitarian, there are certain phrases that they will use. Things like, that makes sense, or, what kind of difference, what kind of measurable difference will this gift make? They'll ask about your collaborations with other nonprofit partners or perhaps school systems, but they love collaboration. Now, as I'm describing each of these 7 personas, I want you to make a note as specific donors come to mind. Or for those of you who have perhaps a very small donor pool, but you've got a long list of prospective donors that you're getting to know, that you're doing the research on, just jot those names down. Like, yes, I've heard them say that. So if you're going to begin to identify within your donors or your prospective donors which persona they most resonate with during tonight's or this morning's session. All right, they might talk about who every child deserves this, or the community needs that. And if they will allow you and appreciate if you can somehow feature them and their philanthropy if it motivates others to give. And they'll also ask that question, who are your other top supporters? And I hear that a lot. All right, so now we're moving on to the devout. They represent 21% of the donors that were surveyed in this research project. As I said, doing good is God's will. And essentially, they give unrestricted gifts based on their relationship with that religious leader. Now, I'm not so sure this really resonates with most arts organizations, but I want you to have the breadth of these all 7 personas. They are very, very modest and conservative when it comes to recognition. So they would never want their gift announced broadly, but maybe just within a very small group of the religious leaders that they align themselves with. So they'll say things like, we're called to make this gift. Any reference, of course, to faith or moral obligation. And they will often pray about their giving decisions. So if you make an ask, they may say, well, I'm going to pray about that. And I usually reply, I've been praying about that. No, I would think that. I don't say it. All right. Next comes our investor. And I will say that in my experience, as we come out of times that have been economically challenging, I feel like there's a higher percentage of people who kind of get that investor mindset. From the research study, these investors are about 15% of the major donors that were surveyed. And their whole philosophy is doing good is good business, right? So I can demonstrate that my company is a leader in this community. I'm going to create consumer affinity. I'm going to be able to attract great employees. I am going to retain my best employees because they'll feel this sense of pride that they work with an organization that gives to the arts, that values the community. This particular persona, the investor, they're going to do all their own research. They're on your website. They're downloading. Well, you may not have 990s. That is such a US thing. Forgive me. But they're on your website and they're looking at your financials for sure. And when it comes to recognition, they like to be seen as a leader within other businesses, right? Especially in their sector. So that's how they like their recognition. So you'll hear them say things like, how will you leverage my gift with others? Maybe in a match gift scenario or a challenge gift scenario. Notice that that's different than the communitarian who says, how will my gift motivate or inspire others? These investors are business people, they're entrepreneurs, they're executives inside companies, and they like leveraged money. And you can maximize that to secure more gifts, larger gifts. They might ask who manages your investments, how have they performed. I mean, I literally secured a $525,000 gift from an investor who wanted 10 years of financials, 10 years of investment performance. I mean, I'd had 3 CEO or CFOs in that time period. This was like going back to like drawings on cave walls for me. But I did it and the gift came. They'll ask, who else is giving at this level? And of course, they're all about impact and outcomes. Next, we have our socialite. And while I did have this illustrated as a woman, I will let you know there are male personas, male socialite personas as well. Even just um, think about football, your football teams, right? Like there are these clubs, if you will, that just gather, friends gather. Like those are male socialites and females, of course. So the socialite represents 11% of the major donors that were surveyed in this research study, and their whole orientation is that doing good is fun. So the cause needs to be like acceptable and approved by their social network. They like hands-on. They want to volunteer. They want to be in the know. If they leave you a voicemail and you don't call them back in 10 minutes, they assume you've been in a terrible car accident, right? They want prompt attention. Take care of these people. And they love public acknowledgement. I earlier in my career learned very quickly the hard way that you need to guide their recognition and acknowledgement. Let's just say if you secured a $10,000 gift or even a $1,000 gift, it's all relative to the scale of your organization. And you said to a socialite, how would you like to be recognized? They might say, well, I'd like my name on your building. Well, we might need to add a few more zeros to that number, I'm afraid, for them to get their name on the building. But they love public acknowledgement, is my point, and you need to carefully guide what is appropriate related to the value of that gift. So you will hear the socialites saying things like, oh, this should be fun, or can I bring my friends, or what does everyone else want to do, right? Or they're very creative, like, oh, I have ideas. And sometimes you're thinking, oy vey, like, how am I going to make that idea happen? But they're creative. And if you can work with them and guide them, it can be a really beautiful relationship. Next, we have our repair. They like doing good in return. They likely fell in love with the arts years ago. It touched their soul in some way. And they just want to make certain that those art experiences are available to other people, regardless of their circumstances. Now, they do like to get to know your people, your beneficiaries, if you will, or your performers, your the students in your classes. However appropriate, they want to be close to the mission delivery, and they only like recognition if it helps inspire or benefits one of the folks that you're serving or one of the artists. So you'll hear them say things like, "Oh, I understand their passion. I feel that same passion." They'll ask, "Do you have any mentoring opportunities?" Or "I see myself in so and so," perhaps that they met through a program. Maybe it's a young author or a young artist. So they're very much. If we were going to rename the repair, we might rename them as the relator. Then we have the altruist. So this is 9% of all major donors who participated in the study. And they really believe that to whom much is given, much is expected, right? So if you have a little, give a little. If you have a lot, give a lot, is their whole orientation. And they make decisions based on the quality of your executive leadership, or in your case, it may be your creative director. And quality is defined by them, but they want a direct relationship with those who are key influencers in your organization. They like to be quietly influential. And what I mean by that is they may not want to serve on your board, but they want to have the ear of board members. They want to have influence in that way. And they do like being low key. So they do not like formal recognition. You'll hear them say things like, "I want to be totally anonymous," or "This is my life's work," or you'll acknowledge them for their generosity and they'll reply, "You staff, you do the hard work. Giving money is easy. That's my honor." They'll ask questions about your creative director or your CEO or executive director. How long have they been in the job? What was their background? Where did they go to school? Uh, you kind of get the sense of that altruist. This is the purest kind of philanthropist. They're giving just out of the pure joy of giving and feeling that's just what you should do. And then we have the dynast. So this is the smallest percentage of major donors who participated in the survey at 8%. And their whole orientation is that doing good is a family tradition. So you'll find that they are extremely cautious because their family name is associated with this gift. So they don't want to tarnish their family name by making a gift that will later embarrass them or be part of a scandal or like this. So they do so much due diligence, and not by themselves. They will have their attorney involved. Like, when we talk about significant gifts, there definitely will call in advisors, maybe their attorney, maybe their financial advisor. I mean, I've been on three-way calls with the banker and the financial advisor and the foundation, the family foundation lead, all just trying to get to a gift agreement. So lots of work up front, but always worth it. Always worth it. After that, they're pretty low maintenance. They're like, just do your work. Don't make a fuss about me. So you'll hear them say things literally like, "Well, I'll share your proposal with my advisor," or "We will need to pre-approve any recognition," right? Not even a press release can you send out without us approving it first in writing. I've had them say to me, "Do you have a standard gift agreement?" And then without taking another breath, they'll say, "Oh, never mind, let's use ours." So they are very much in control of their philanthropy. Um, and they'll ask for lots and lots of upfront information. But then again, they're easy peasy after that. Just come to agreement. Like, send me an outcomes report within 9 months. I'm good to go. All right. So that's an overview of the 7 personas. So now what we want to do is say, okay, now how does this really apply to arts and culture organizations? And I just want to recognize that, some of you are very large national organizations and you may have a very robust donor database to work from. Some of you may be micro organizations, grassroots organizations, where you have just a handful of donors and you are really seeking to build your donor database and build like a groundswell of support for your organization, for your festival, for your theater group, for your museum. Uh, and then some of you are like somewhere in between. So, what we're going to be covering next, I just want you to know that it's all relative, it's all scalable. For some of you, a major gift is $1,000. For some of you, a major gift is $50,000. It doesn't matter as it relates to these donor personas because people are people. So, I just want you to know that. Okay, so here we go. What I have seen, and Stephen and I discussed earlier as well, and that is that if you look at all 7 personas, there are really about 4 that you very, very likely have inside your organization. Some combination of these 4. Not that you don't have a devout or one of the other personas that we're not going to do the deep dive on, because you may. But if you look at the majority of the major donors or major donor prospects in your communities, most of them probably fit inside these 4. So this, we think that in 75 minutes, this is going to be the most valuable thing for you to know. So the first one is the communitarian, followed by the investor, then the socialite, and then the repayer. So what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about some specific organizations. I'll share a few examples, and then we're going to walk through how we might engage in all 4 of these personas, these arts and culture personas within those organizations, right? So this is going to be like, and I want you to be thinking, you probably will have great ideas, even more than I'm going to be sharing. So jot these down. What would you do, knowing your programs, the way that you do? What would you do to engage these different personas? All right, are you excited? Yes. Guys, excited. Annabelle's, yep. Okay, good. All right. So if there's an overarching message about our friend, the communitarian, it is that communitarians give to the arts as their way of paying civic rent. They believe in the arts and they believe that the arts should be accessible to everyone, right? So this is not an exclusive kind of organization. They really believe it should be inclusive of your entire community, particularly those who might be disadvantaged or perhaps schools that aren't offering as robust arts and culture opportunities inside their school systems based on funding or whatever the situation is. So just remember as we talk through some of these examples that doing good makes sense for the communitarian. They like organizational effectiveness. They prefer restricted gifts. And those restricted gifts could start small and grow over time. And they like individual attention, not lots of public attention, just individual attention or just within small groups. There we go. Investor. So the overarching umbrella message about our investors is that investors understand that having a community rich in art and culture attracts families and attracts businesses. So the arts and culture are good, they're good for business. Again, they help showcase this organization, this company as a leader in the community. They are hoping that because of that, you will choose their product or service. They're hoping that that leadership will attract new employees or retain the best of their best employees because of pride with their association, pride of their employer. And again, they want a return on that investment. I think that one of the articles I read that was actually on the Creative Arts Partnership website really talked about how corporations um, don't give to you. They don't necessarily take, I mean, they don't necessarily want the arts. They're not giving to the arts. They're giving to your supporters, like the people that they want, your patrons. They want those customers. And that's fine, right? As long as they're giving and it's helping us grow and bring art and culture to the masses in our community or nationally, it's all good money, right? It's all to a good end. So they want good RNI on ROI, return on investment in their contributions. They want impact reporting. They want to know, how many people clicked through and saw my logo, how many people attended that event where we were presenting sponsor, how many flyers went home to school children that had our logo as the presenting sponsor for um, this particular youth program. That's what they want to know, and that's how they justify making an investment. I will tell you that $27.1 million gift. The executive that I worked with was a communitarian, but he used an investor mindset to justify a $27.1 million gift to his board of directors. So again, understanding these motivations is really key. Okay, so next we have our socialite. And again, socialites want to see their gifts in action. They are hands on people and they love gathering with friends and neighbors to engage in the arts and to support your organizations. So for them, giving is fun. You have to be approved by their social network, like a really acceptable, fun, exciting organization and charitable cause. They want prompt attention. They want to be in the know. They want to be the VIPs. They get all the insider information before anybody else. Are some of you thinking, oh, yeah, I'm thinking of this donor and that donor? I can see their faces and love public recognition. And then again, there's our repair. They simply love the arts. They feel deeply related to the artists and creative expression based on personal experiences. I worked with an executive once who gave very generously to the arts. And I asked him why. And he said, I cannot carry a tune. I could not act my way out of a brown paper bag. I have no artistic ability at all. He was like a Silicon Valley tech kind of um, executive. And he said, but you know what? I was that awkward kid and I wasn't a jock. I didn't belong there. And I didn't have any talent. So I wasn't an easy fit for the arts. But what I found was that I could help behind the scenes. I could run the lights. I could set up the set for my school theater, and it was there that I found community. It was there that I found a place where I could belong, and I want every kid to belong somewhere. And so that's why I have fell in love with the arts and I give to the arts. So there's always a story behind generosity, behind charitable giving. And so for the repair, it could be, that they fell in love with a particular performance, that they fell in love with music. It could be they found a community of warm, accepting, loving people through the arts. It can be for a number of reasons, but there's always a reason. And your job is to figure out what is that reason. All right, so let's talk about some examples. So in Detroit, where I'm from, uh, last fall, you know, during the pandemic, the Michigan Opera Theater did a special drive-through performance. So we were not allowed to gather. They couldn't open their doors. Their stage was dimmed. But what they did, with the help of Ford Motor Company as presenting sponsor, note the Mustang there in the in the picture, they did a performance of Twilight God. And what they did is they took the Detroit Opera House parking garage, and every floor on the parking garage had a 10-minute performance of a scene from Twilight God. And it was free. It was just a drive through and it was completely free. So let's kind of break that down. Let's take a look at it, and how would um, I engage each of those four personas in this experience based on what we know about them. So I'm just going to give you some eye candy here. So this was soprano Christine Gerke, and she played Brunhilde. And so people would drive through. She sang, I mean, move you to tears kind of singing. Here we see some students from Wayne State University who participated in the performance on the second floor, and they're dancing, and it's just exquisite. And then here's poet Marcia Music, who's just a very well-known poet in the city of Detroit and a writer. And she, of course, was playing Erda. So people would drive through, they would pause, she would be repeating this performance. And it was families, it was seniors, it was vanfuls of children. So how would you engage the communitarian in that drive-through experience? So I've just kind of brainstormed some ideas. You will think of ideas as well and write down, think about this as a performance that you might do. Now, it doesn't need to be a pandemic performance on, 5 floors of a parking garage. It can be on your stage. I mean, you're way ahead of the US in terms of recovery. Good for you. I hope we catch up soon. So what I'm suggesting is for a communitarian, I would invite them to attend a performance with a group of school kids or a group of senior citizens. Remember, they really believe that the art should be accessible to everyone. So, how can I showcase that accessibility for groups of people that may not have access? Again, children, youth, senior citizens, and maybe there's even members of a community that's just has disadvantaged circumstances, low income, or transportation to your venue is a challenge. So inviting this communitarian to be a part of that. So the second idea, I might approach them to sponsor a special group to participate in this drive-through opera experience, or for you, a performance on one of your stages. And ask then the children who participated or the seniors to just send a note of thanks. Like, what did it mean to them? How did it feel? How were they inspired? You could even do a short little video if you chose, right? I mean, we have these amazing video cameras at our fingertips these days. And I don't think that these videos need to be professionally um, generated, right? I mean, there's nothing like a good, heart touching, organic little video sent by text or email. So give them that opportunity. And the other thing I will say is that, a lot of us think, well, maybe some older supporters aren't very tech savvy. And the truth is, the most recent studies say that they're more and more tech savvy, and they've gotten that way because we were in shutdown and it was the only way they could get access to their children or grandchildren. So they've learned quickly. And of course, now that we're moving out of pandemic, those technology skills are moving out with them. So don't underestimate the value of technology for all age groups. Um, the key is that for this communitarian, we want to showcase how diverse community members and special groups have access to the arts. How, in this case, how they had access to the drive through event. And again, we can text them pictures or videos to showcase that. Big smiles at the end as people exit that parking garage. And leveraging this opportunity to showcase community collaboration. Remember how the communitarian wants to see collaboration? So think about, the Opera House collaborated with Wayne State University dance students. They collaborated with Detroit Public Schools who were doing distance learning to make certain families knew about this free opportunity to experience the opera. So see where we're going with this? And this is what I want you to begin thinking about for your organizations. For each of these personas, how could you engage them in ways that were game changers, that could be transformational? Um, I'll tell you another story in a little bit when we get to, I have a ballet story for you. There we go. So let's talk about the investor. How might we engage the investor in that drive-through opera experience or your version of getting folks to the stage? So first of all, the investor is all about how do we do good business, right? How do I get my brand out there in front of consumers in a way that creates consumer affinity and employee loyalty, employee attraction? So notice, again, Ford Motor Company did a brilliant product placement at that event, right? Having that Mustang out there, it was the 10 millionth Mustang off the line. Kind of cool. You could even, if you're doing valet for at a venue, there could be a corporate sponsor or supporter who gets to leave a little leave behind in the car. Just have valet leave. Even a bottle of water with their logo is a nice takeaway, and it's very inexpensive. And frankly, they should pay for it as part of their sponsorship. All right, so that's an idea. Because these investors also want to engage with other executive leaders, they want to be in that peer group with them. You could plan for a pre or post performance reception, even just 30 minutes, where they get to rub elbows. There's a very short recognition, so they get that verbal recognition within their peer group, which is one of the things that motivates them. You can provide a digital stewardship report after about how many people came to the performance, how many of them were children, like some photos, some short videos. And what they can do is not only use that as a return on investment in terms of brand exposure, a documentation of exposure. They can cut and paste from it and post those things on their own social media handles. So proud to support the Australian Ballet Company. So delighted, and they could post it even on their company intranet so their employees see firsthand how their employer cares about this community. Okay. Also recognize them through your channels where your patrons and other business leaders will see their leadership, whether that's social media or if you're doing, you could do a press release. Like you decide how you want to do it, what makes the most sense. But a little recognition in this manner is really low cost or no cost, and it means a lot to those corporate, to the investor persona. Also recognizing them on your website with their permission, logo placement, recognition. And here's why. This is the persona that does their own research before they give to you. They are all over your website already. So they'll see the recognition, they'll see the logo placement, and they will feel good about it. All right. And some of you may be doing this already. I hope you are. And if not, like Let's just do that. All right, let's talk about the socialites. So, how would we have engaged them in this drive through opera example? So, first of all, we would include them and their friends, or their social club or circle, or their sorority, or their book club, like how whatever group they really cling to, invite that group in the planning of a component of the event. Now, don't invite them. This is like insider lessons learned. Don't invite them to plan the event because you will lose control. They're so creative and they're so hands on that you'll be like, oh my gosh, this thing is like out of control. So instead, pick a project. Say at the end, as families are leaving the performance in the parking garage, we want the children, if they have children with them, to have a takeaway gift. So, for example, I found like here's Pavarotti's favorite children's songs, a little CD or a book about opera, right? So maybe there's a little packet that children get to kind of maybe we've planted a seed, we've ignited a spark and love for the opera, and so as families go home, they can nurture that new interest. So that's an ideal project for the socialites. They will go out, they'll find the goodie bag items, they'll probably give them in kind, they'll package them up in a cute little tote, and they'll gladly hand them to all the cars with children on the way out. Or even seniors who say, oh, my grandchildren would love this, right? So give them a component, a small, manageable project that's fun. So it has to be fun, right? If there's a component of this, like give out the books and then you need to schlep all the boxes, assign the schlepping to someone else because that's not fun and you won't get them back. All right, take lots of photos of this group working together, making a difference, shared on social media, send them to the press, try and get the press, uh, even print photos and tuck them in a handwritten note and mail them to either all of the socialites who participated or at least the organizers. Can you see how you could do some of these things in your organization? It would make a difference. Yeah, good. Okay, so how would we engage the repayer? So the repayer, invite them to a rehearsal, any like behind the scenes where they get to meet performers, the creative director, any special groups. They make great guides or docents because they love the arts. They're so passionate, and that passion is contagious. Like you may have walked in liking the art, you spend 10 minutes with a repayer and you're over the moon in love with the arts. So engage their special talents, learn their story. So maybe it is the executive from Silicon Valley who built sets, and this is like nostalgia to lend a hand this one time on this one project. So whatever their talents are, leverage those, and you'll see them like they'll nostalgia is one of the key motivators for giving. Nostalgia, patriotism. Okay. Let me introduce you to Stephen Polk. So, Stephen Polk is a businessman in Detroit. He is a fifth generation CEO of this company. So, the founder was great, 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 great grandfather, right, in the US Civil War. And he went to college and got his undergrad in biology and was getting his master's and doing an internship in forestry and birds. He loves birds. And his family tapped him and said, your father is not well, and we need you to come take over the family business. And the family business at that point in time was $200 million in debt. He did not want to do it because it was not his passion, it was not his love, but he did it. And under his leadership, they eventually sold that company for $1.2 billion. He served on the board of the Detroit Zoo. And as a part, so from as a part of that board service, he knew that they really wanted to do something um, about to have a display from Antarctica. They wanted to have a penguin display. And as a part of this passion he had, the executive director said, what if we took a trip to Antarctica to observe penguins in their natural habitat? And Stephen said, yes, I think we should do that. In fact, I'll pay for the trip. Let's go. So you can guess the end of the story, right? So extraordinary transformational experience comes back. They now have a plan for a $20 million penguin exhibit, and Stephen and his wife Bobby make a $10 million gift to that exhibit, right? And then in short order, other foundations and other leaders came on board. So incredible. Here's what the quote. They were featured in a lot of publications, but D Business. I lifted this quote from the article the interview that they did with them, and it's what Stephen said was, the two of us, he and Bobby, the two of us are really happy that we could make this happen. It was a great intersection of personal interest, family interest, and I think a chance to really do something special for our community. When I looked at potential give backs to the local community, I don't think there's anything quite like a zoo. Now, what persona do you think he is? Communitarian. Even though he's a business executive and has that return on investment mindset as a learned behavior, his innate behavior is a communitarian. The potential give back to the community, right? It was all about community. And in a private conversation I had with him, he said, Tammy, we just didn't know where else we could make a gift that would touch over 1 million children a year and put a smile on their face. All right, so that penguin exhibit is a local treasure. You in Australia have so many extraordinary national and regional treasures as well. So let's just kind of talk through this. There's the um, Harleywood School of Astronomy, and they're doing an annual scientific meeting. It's coming up in July, not far from now. So, gosh, that's a pretty incredible opportunity to engage some supporters. You have the Science Works, uh, which is a children's museum, right? Some of you probably know of this organization. I learned about them online. It's in Melbourne. Stephen, that's where you are, right? Yep. So they help children explore STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math, and music. Incredible work that happens there. Oz Kids. Oh my gosh, I fell in love with this organization just online. So they cultivate and encourage children and youth to write stories and poetry and create art. And they have contests and mentor. I mean, it's just incredible. And then I found this is, I would love to take this trip to the Tiwi Islands to go through the Aboriginal Art and Culture Center. So you get off the ferry, come onto the island. There's some kind of a smoking ceremony, I'm assuming is like a smudge kind of thing. And then you learn about the culture and the textiles, and you actually create your own screen printing of this textile, and you get to take it home. And I just think it's extraordinary. And they have elders there who tell tales and the folklore of the region, and I just think it would be incredible. So when we think about any of those national and regional treasures, how would you engage a communitarian, right? So you could have them or them and their families participate in some experience, maybe even with a diverse community of members because they want these experiences available to everyone. So it could be gosh, could you imagine like being at the astrological annual meeting as a major donor with a family member, and maybe you're stargazing at something that happens once a year, or maybe you're hearing from an expert about some planetary. I mean, this is not my wheelhouse, but I love the stars. They're beautiful. I think that even if you're not into, like the science of it, it would be extraordinary. You could invite any one of the communitarians in your organization. If you're with Oz Kids, they could serve on a panel of judges for a poetry slam or one of the art or creative writing contests. I mean, no one wants the heat of being the only judge, right? So put them on a panel. Otherwise, everyone will win first place. That you could include them as a chaperone on some cultural field trip. You could invite them to a mission tour. And I really encourage all of you to create a mission tour, 1 hour. There's a standing first Thursday of every month at noon, and you take people on a life-changing, heart-stirring tour of your mission, not the venue, right? Like, here's the copy room, here's the computer lab. That's so dull. But here's the stage, here's the green room that people never really see. Here's all the sets. I remember once touring the parade company where they literally store all the parade um, floats and mannequins and the big heads. And I just never wanted to leave. It was incredible. And again, you could also invite them to a town hall. Town hall implies everyone, open to everyone, versus other personas who would prefer a VIP reception. So again, start thinking about how you can add on to what you're already doing with just a little more work to really have an exponential result in your fundraising. All right, the investor. How would we engage them in any one of those experiences that we just talked about? So first of all, this is really straightforward. If this is an engineering, a construction, a mining company, a technology company, there's a direct alignment to the the engineering, the science museum for children. So match up their corporate social responsibility charter, what they want to focus on, and see how that maps to the work that you're doing, and walk them down that path. Co-create workplace mentoring or internship programs, right? Again, they want a workforce for the future. And the more that we can seed employees with a passion for the skill sets that this employer will need down the road, the better. Again, we talked about digital stewardship reports, things that they can cut and paste to include on their intranet or their social media handles to showcase to your community the great ways that they give back. And for this group, invite that executive leadership team on the mission tour. Invite them to an exclusive porch talk or VIP gathering with a dozen other leaders to talk about how you're coming out of pandemic. What's next for you? What's the big challenge? What's the big need that you're working to solve? Right? That insider conversation where they can actually contribute. Well, have you considered this or have you considered that? Because when people give ideas, whether those ideas get put into action or not, when they feel valued, their philanthropy will likely follow. All right. Next, socialites. So, how would we engage them? Again, them and their circle of friends as volunteers at your art camp, your science camp, your astrology camp, your theater camp, right? I mean, they love that. They can even have a little project. They could serve lunch or refreshments at the poetry slam or at the creative writing contest. Again, just remember, they are not the cleanup crew. They're the serve big smiles, like all the feels crew. Don't have them schlepping boxes and wiping down the counters afterwards. Have another crew for that, like a repair who will do anything to help. Include them as potential chaperones if you're doing traveling performances or field trips or excursions. Again, these Socialites love lots of attention. So print those photos, send them with handwritten notes, text them, whatever their preferred mode of communication is. Feature them in your newsletter or your e newsletter. Interview the leader of that group, and then invite them and their friends, like a special mission tour just for them. Again, super special. There we go. And here's our repair. So if your repair has a story about coming up through the arts, about how the arts shaped him or her, about how the arts were really the seed of their success in life, have them come in and share their story with your young performers or your emerging artists. Be that source of encouragement and inspiration for them. You can also engage them as volunteers in a STEM activity if you're at the Children's Science Museum, or as a writing or theater coach. They are also great participants on a panel of judges, chaperones, mission tours, or invite them to observe a programmatic event, right? So whether it's a behind the scenes kind of thing, it's something that, not everyone would have access to. They love to be close to where the mission is being delivered. And they like to be kind of behind the scenes, supporting. They're very selfless, and it brings them joy to engage with you in that way. So those are my some of my suggestions. All right, so let's talk about the Australian Ballet. Holy smokes. I mean, truly a national treasure. This was a photograph when they introduced their new creative director, David Halberg. He is front and center there with the principal dancers flanking him to the right and the left. So that is a milestone. That is an opportunity to really engage or re engage some of these four personas, particularly um, the communitarian, the socialite, like that's pretty special, and the repayer, because they like being close to the source of the creation. Of course, the Australian Ballet, not only do they have classes for um, youth and children, but they do a post-show Q&A. I'm wondering if any of you have participated in one of these. I'm sure, yeah, Stephen has for certain. And it has to be just extraordinary. I can tell you, my very first fundraising job was the director of development for the Girl Scouts. So for you, Girl Guides. And we took a group of Girl Scouts of all ages, from the very beginners to the more senior Girl Scouts, and we took them to a performance of the Nutcracker. And I brought along a few of my top donors, and it was magical because the donors and I kind of sat in the this our section. We sat at the very top point of our section, and all the girls sat in front of us. And throughout the performance, you saw their little arms go up into a little pirouette, and they would just and it was like I was watching them, the girls, more than the performance, and our donors were too. So have your donors come and experience this. It's also always kind of endearing and sometimes hilarious when children ask questions. I remember at that same job, we brought in Dr. Sally Ride, who was the first American woman in space. And we had this STEM program we did with the local university. The local university was actually bringing in Dr. Ride. But we had a special bagel and coffee reception with Dr. Ride and some of our donors and some of the university's donors that brought her in. And then she did a Q&A, a talk followed by Q&A about breaking through the glass ceiling in the 70s when she was an astronaut. And it was, that was what it was. Like some of the older youth would ask, like, how did you break through the glass ceiling? What gave you the courage? What was your inspiration? And then there was a little girl. Oh my goodness, she was probably the age of this beautiful little girl featured here. And she raised her hand bravely and she said, "How do you go to the bathroom in space?" So sweet. And you'll have the same experience if you can invite some of your donors to participate in any kind of Q&A, any kind of engagement with the youth. Oh, and here's a beautiful video. So I just want to emphasize the extraordinary impact of video, whether you're showcasing your work with youth or children, or you're showcasing, the legacy of some of your artists. So I'm just going to share this. Hopefully you'll be as inspired as I was.
Today we did a workshop with the Australian Ballet.
It was really inspiring seeing those dances. One day I think I would like to do something like that. I never done ballet before.
A lot of them are quite shame about doing anything in front of anyone. It's really tricky sometimes to engage these kids. So today, to see within the first 5 minutes, kids getting up and participating was just incredible. It's something that doesn't really happen too often in Broome.
We unfortunately don't get as many opportunities as we'd like to, but having the Australian Ballet come is one of the probably bigger opportunities that we can get without having to travel around.
It'll help me when I'm playing footy. That your spine has lots of little bones in it. It's easier to breathe when you're up straight.
When I'm older, I would like to choreograph, and when they came in, it helped me learn different motifs and ways to choreograph dances. It was very interesting to just learn about all the different jobs that were at the Australian Ballet. I didn't know they had so many things that you could do there.
This task we did, we had to make our name out of movements with our bodies. The process was actually really quick. I usually struggle with improvisation in classes, but what we did today in the workshop really helped me. Today is going to be very exciting today because I'm going to the ballet performance at the library.
Especially part of their performance from Plain Jane that they do touring around with all the different schools.
I really enjoyed learning the different movements that the King and Plain Jane did that worked well together in the show.
By the end of the workshop, we had kids that I can barely get to say anything, even just to me sometimes, let alone to the rest of the class, up performing in front of others, which was just beautiful.
I also loved hearing their personal experiences. It made me feel really good. I kept falling over while we were spinning, but Ben said, "Don't worry, I've fallen over heaps of times."
Dancers were very helpful, and they kept saying to us, "Keep trying and you'll get better and better."
It was really encouraging to hear that a professional dancer still makes mistakes.
Really inspirational from their journeys that they were talking about, and how not just us are feeling the same thing. So we kind of connected with them.
I hope I could do this again next time.
It makes me more free and words can't really describe it.
So obviously an incredibly inspiring video, but just know the point I want to make is the value and the power of video. It does not have to be as beautifully produced as that video was. It can be more organic and still just as meaningful, right? And for some of your donors, especially if you're a smaller organization with fewer resources, a more produced video might actually have them questioning your spending money in that way. So the more organic, I think sometimes the more endearing. Here's another video that I just love. This is a woman, is a retired prima ballerina who obviously has some health issues now, and who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And just think about just the beauty of sharing something like this with your supporters? I've probably watched that 20 times, and I'm just as moved and inspired by it every single time. So, again, how might we engage our communitarian in the ballet experience in this example? Obviously, invite them to attend with a group of school age children or youth, or maybe seniors or a member of disadvantaged community or circumstances. Give them the opportunity to sponsor that group, right? I mean, that can be a very meaningful first gift or next gift for some of your communitarians. Leverage this opportunity to showcase community collaboration. We're working with this school who's had big cutbacks in the arts program, or they've never had funding for their arts program. Um, we're working with this children's center that has services, provides mental and behavioral health services to children who've experienced abuse and neglect or who have developmental delays. And we feel like exposure to the arts would be so enriching for them. Invite them to that post Q&A, that post ballet performance Q&A, the behind the scenes tour, and to your version of the Hallberg conversation. So the creative director of the Australian Ballet holds sessions like conversations with the creative director. And again, how powerful and what a really a privilege to be able to participate. All right. Next, of course, we have our investor. And really, the investors are pretty straightforward, right? It's a lot of the same things that we talked about previously. The socialites, again, let's engage them. Let's give them behind the scenes exclusivity. Let's invite them to your version of the Hallberg conversations, and it's just with their group. Or engage them in third party fundraisers, have their friends come together to do a fundraiser, to maybe it's a peer to peer fundraiser to support your scholarship programs. And then, of course, with our repayer, the closer they can get to the artists, the happier they'll be. Or to youth and inspiring that love of the arts. So inviting them to some of the same behind the scenes kinds of activities will be a real winner. And so really, the question I ask of you is, How will you make giving to your organization one of the most meaningful experiences of your donor's life? That's really what this is about. And I want to recognize and honor you and just distinguish the privilege that we have as fundraising professionals, as nonprofit professionals, to help donors write their story, to be that third line in the final chapter of their life, to be a reason that their life had a richness that would not be available to them if it were not for your arts and culture organization. It is a privilege, and I think it's something we need to really own and honor and take action on. Okay, so I want to walk through some bonus materials. These are some things that you can download and as a part of the presentation. So how to get started. So whether you are a large organization and maybe you have a process, just start with a number of donors. If you're a large organization with a bigger team, start with 20 donors, 50 donors. If you're a small grassroots or medium-sized organization, just list your top 5 donors based on giving value, longevity of giving, or potential capacity. Like, you can slice and dice this a number of different ways, but pick 5 people and start matching them to one of these personas. Have some discovery conversations with them to understand their motivations. You may not know, you may say they could be a communitarian, but they're also kind of a repayer. Well, the only way to distinguish that is by being that little detective and sleuthing out in conversations what is their predominant motivation. And one way to do that is to ask these distinguishing persona questions, right? And of course, you're not going to tell them, like, let's determine what persona you are today in 2 cups of tea. No, it's just going to be a conversation. And what I want you to do is pick 2 or 3 of these questions that you will weave into your conversation. Like, what do you want to accomplish with your giving? What are your needs and expectations after a gift is made? Or what's the most special way you've ever been thanked for making a gift? Or tell me about one of your most meaningful giving experiences. And it's okay if it's not to us. I really just want to understand. So use these questions, print them out. I also put some of these persona um, distinctions on some little cards. You can print these and tape them up in your workspace, just as a quick reference, because sometimes that donor calls and you're like, where's that deck? I want to. So just have it pinned up. There's also a fillable PDF called the Major Gift Portfolio Planner. And here's where, on this upper left-hand quadrant, where you could just list your top 5 folks that you want to create a month-by-month plan for, or your top 10. And then perhaps this donor engagement planner would be where you could identify your youth program, your performance schedule, and some other programmatic area where you can plot out, like, what are the things that I could convert easily into a transformational donor experience? Okay, Stephen, we have 6 minutes.
Wow, Tammy, so much information, very dense presentation. Thank you so much. There's so much in there to take on board. I should just mention there's been a few questions around the availability of the presentation post this session. That will be available to you. You'll get an email with the link. Catherine will send out, and I'd also like to acknowledge Catherine's work in setting this up. Thank you, Catherine, here at CPA. A lot of kind of comments and questions coming through the chat. Tammy, I guess there's a question around, the relatability of the North American experience into the Australian experience, and you touched on this a little bit in terms of, obviously the local examples. But I'm also wondering, the principles, I guess, remain the same. In the North American context and the Australian context. I wonder if you had any further comments around that.
Well, I think at the core, people are people, but certainly cultural nuances do have an impact. And so I think that the best way to address that is by looking at those discovery questions and really just getting to know your donors at that deeper level, asking them what motivates them and why do they give and who taught them the power of giving and the joy of giving. And I think that regardless of any, translation, cultural differences, that will just help you get to the heart of that donor and then follow your good instincts.
Absolutely. And I should also mention, I'm sure nationally, many of you have connected with the Creative Partnerships Australia's state managers. We have representatives in every state and territory, which are available post this session, of course, to further calibrate Tammy's presentation and to do a deep dive in any particular areas that you want. So if you're not in touch with Creative Partnerships Australia state managers, please by all means do that. And I think, Tammy, I can talk about creating a sense of meaningful belonging in terms of attracting donors. And I think, it's always important to bear in mind that, the great gift your organisations offer to potential donors is that sense of meaning and belonging. And I think, often if we're feeling a bit mawkish about working with donors, or this feels, a little bit sort of overly ambitious, hanging on to that sense of, we are actually offering through the arts experiences, a great gift. And I've had the personal experience of, being thanked generously by by actual donors, for what we provided into their experience in their lives. I think that the only other comment I'd make that's coming through the chat is around, possibly the only archetype that didn't perhaps resonate, so much in Australia is really about the devout persona. Perhaps, in the North American experience, that's probably, a major category. Perhaps not so much in Australia, particularly in the arts. Any comments, Tammy?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the devout in North America typically is for, Christian schools or universities or right to life groups. It's a it's a it is a very distinct niche. So if it doesn't resonate really with the Australian experience, ignore it. Go with the ones that do.
Resonates with us, Tammy. We're in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and it resonates big time with us. And we'd probably argue would resonate really nationally. Actually, it's a pretty untapped kind of space to be working in.
Yeah, I think the born agains especially. But I guess in terms of a cultural context, like in the West, we have lots of community groups we work with. We work with young people who are really religious. And so actually this is a very important kind of persona for us.
Very good.
We're inclusive and we're kind of reaching out to everybody.
And understanding that, okay, this is the way we can actually. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Way to distinguish that. I mean, that is an opportunity for you. And perhaps it's an opportunity that's under maximized if you look at the entire philanthropic landscape. I mean, you could be filling a very specific niche in your region. Good for you.
Yeah, and I guess that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tammy, sorry to interrupt. I guess that illustrates, how particular everyone's circumstances are and how bespoke everyone's circumstances are, both geographically, organisationally, in terms of art form specifics. It's a pretty highly calibrated area. We're running out of time, folks. So once again, Tammy, thank you so much. There is so much. Yes, little clap.
Thank you.
A round of applause, albeit on mute. Thank you so much, Tammy. Yes, everyone, please look out for the feedback forms you'll receive and also the links you'll receive from the wonderful Catherine, who will send that out to you in the next little while. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance, and look out for the next in the series of the Knowledge Series here from CPA. So that's it from us. Thank you and goodbye. Have a great day.